Hello everyone, I hope you can hear me quite okay. Just wait a few minutes till everyone joins. Please let me know in comments if you can hear me well. So this is my first time ever broadcasting to YouTube, and it was so much fun setting up the OBS. Let's see how it works. Okay, so it seems we are all settled. Let's start. Today I'm going to talk about kind of unusual way to marry JavaScript and Elixir. Before we start, I want to do a quick announcement. If you have any questions, I can see the chat all the time, so if you have any question, just go ahead and I'll try to answer either live or after the presentation. So how are we going to proceed? We'll have a quick presentation about the idea I had, and then we'll do some live coding, which I'm scared as fuck of. So let's start. Okay, so my name is Lucian. I work in Server. It's a company I co-founded with Michał Suski, Sławek Czajkowski, Tomek Niezgoda, Kazik Piętka. So it's probably one of the first SaaS companies that are primarily using Elixir and started the whole journey with Elixir, because the first proof of concept was built in Elixir, and that's how we went from there. I also consider myself a web hacker. I love to play with different ideas. Most of them makes no sense at all, but from time to time I come up with something that, well, it's shareable, as I think this idea is. So my journey started like probably 15 years ago as a programmer, but let's not go so far back in time. Let's go back 8 years ago. I was a Rails developer for Pilot, working full-time on clients projects. And that's how it started for me, for real, to be a programmer. And like I'm talking about this because there were many ideas that I figured out using Rails, which I then used as inspiration for all my further career. So I worked strictly in Rails, but then I added some React to the mix, and it went along like 2-3 years or so. Then I started Server. It was a side project, but well, it's a very, very cool story, because actually Server started as a side project of mine to learn Elixir, and this is a good example of how side project that you just want to learn on can be transformed to $100K MR plus company. So I'm really proud of that story, and I see a lot of opinions around the web that when you are building a company, when you are trying to create a product, you should use whatever technology you know the best to avoid the churn of learning new stuff. And I don't quite agree with that, because if something starts as a side project, you need a lot of motivation, and sometimes the product itself is not enough. Until you get your customers there, until you get your first paid plans on Stripe and so on, you need to have some motivation. And to me, Elixir and learning Elixir and Phoenix was this motivation. So if you want to start I don't know, something that you may even see as very successful SaaS in the future, it's not necessarily that you have to use whatever you know. Camille says that there is an echo. I'm not sure. Probably because I'm in this big office of ours, which is pretty not furnished yet, so there may be some echo. I'm sorry for that. So anyway, I was talking about how I used Exit to bootstrap server, and how I was previously working in React and Rails. And I'm speaking about this because, to me, like mixing the ideas from Rails, like building web app in Rails, and then mixing the ideas from React, lead to like some part of the stuff that Elixir did. Like it has a Ruby-inspired syntax, but on the other hand, the philosophy of creating the apps and creating the apps in Elixir is like very functional, because it's primarily functional programming language. There's a lot of immutability focus and so on. So it's a bit like React, and that's why I think that's like having experience in React and having experience in Rails made me a pretty good Elixir developer from the start, because I could grasp all the concepts pretty easily. Okay, so let's go to the essence of the presentation. So let's start with React. When I speak to backend developers and Elixir developers about React, they're all scared because, you know, JavaScript. No, I don't want to do that. React, I don't want to do that. It's like huge pile of mess and so on. You need to know Webpack, you need to know Redux and so on. And it's like there's very, very big, I would say, frustration coming from those developers when they try to create a web app in 2020 and they fail, because there is so many things to learn. It's really hard to figure out where to start. It's really hard to not make your app a big pile of mess at the end of the day. And why is that? I think because there's a misunderstanding. React has to be misunderstood because like people expect it to do things that it cannot do. So what does React do? It's very simple, and it's nothing more than that probably. So React is a function, like on a very high level. It's a function that transforms some state to some UI. In case of React DOM, it just renders HTML and hooks up some events. And besides that, it handles all of the UI events like key presses, mouse presses, and so on. So however user is interacting with your application, React will be able to figure out what's going on, and then that's on you what to do with it. So these are those two things that React does, and in my opinion, React does them very good. But there are plenty of things that React doesn't do, and those things are really necessary to build a big scale bulletproof web application. So it doesn't do data fetching. It doesn't do any state management besides those primitives. It doesn't do any routing. It doesn't do anything to help you with organizing your project. It doesn't do any caching, etc., etc. So React excels in web UIs, but it's not enough to build the whole web application. Why does React excel in web UIs? It embraces one-way data flow, immutability, and purity. And I think on the high level, React is a very functional library, but it has to fight the JavaScript ecosystem, right? Because JavaScript has almost no immutability concepts. And that's why it may feel like clunky to work with React, because it has to constantly fight JavaScript. But it's been a while since it first came up. It's like, I don't know, 6 years, 7 years probably. And it came a long journey. When it started, they all used, class components. You had to figure out how to bind these and so on. Then they started to encourage functional components that holds no state. And right now there are hooks, which are also misunderstood and source of frustration. But when you use them as a tool and when you know how to use them, I think they are very powerful and pleasant to use. So React might feel weird because it tries to build functional layer of rendering web UIs on top of JavaScript, which is not really functional. I mean, it is functional, but there are some missing concepts in there. And the problem is that JavaScript is going nowhere. It will be still there. It will be a while until it can be replaced with something else. There are some ideas like WebAssembly, but it still doesn't support calling DOM. So JavaScript is going nowhere, and we probably want. It's probably a good idea to try to embrace it and try to use those good parts, and try to use all of these ideas that React developers had along this time, and try to see what can happen. So we can think of React as a set of primitives for building web UIs. And of course, you need more than those primitives to build the web app. So my hypothesis is, if you treat it like a set of primitives and only set of primitives, it will be no longer frustrating, because it's like getting frustrated that I don't know, your byte type in C++ does not hold all the numbers you want, or cannot do some stuff that you wanted to do. That's why we build abstractions on top of that. And I think when we use React as a library and build abstractions on top of that, it can be a pleasant experience. So let's talk about Redux. Redux is one of the abstractions over React, which tries to solve the state management. But there is still this problem. Okay, it helps keeping the state, but that's about it. It doesn't do anything else. And it introduces another layer of frustration and boilerplate. So it's you need to learn first React, then you need to learn Redux, how to use it, and then you end up with another pile of mess, because it doesn't solve all those problems you need to solve. So how does Redux work? Again, it's very simple. It just keeps the state as a set of functions which transform this state to another state, and you just need to pass some actions into those reducers that you write in Redux. So reducer is a function of state and action that outputs the state, and that's it. That's all Redux do. Redux is also a primitive, to be honest, that there is no data fetching, there is no caching, there is no sharing client and server, sharing logic between client and server. There is no handling of side effects, and you need to use a separate library for that, for example, Redux Thang. And well, you can install React, you can install Redux, you can learn on all the stuff. You can spend 2 weeks or 2 months reading how to build web apps, but all you end up with is a web UI library and a library that holds and manages the state. So still, it's not enough. Sorry. So just to quickly recap, React excels in rendering web UIs, but it's not enough. And there is more to building web apps and rendering UI. And ecosystem for other stuff like Redux, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. It's fragmented and frustrating on its own. So that's about JavaScript and React, and let's talk about gen servers. So one day I realized that gen servers work in a very similar way to Redux, because in essence they are functions of message and state that produces another state. But there is some twist that you can safely handle side effects in there, and you know they're async and so on. They're powered by Beam, etc. But you are all Elixir developers, hopefully, so you know what I'm talking about. So let's compare the Elixir gen server and then the reducer from Redux. So they can all have some initial state. Like I created a simple module of handling to-do list. So there is initial state of like one to-do with ID and name. And then there are 2 actions, one to add to-dos and one to remove to-dos. So you can write nice immutable code in JavaScript until you can't. And I think for state management, immutability is really great. So yeah, let me give you a moment to sync it. Are there any questions maybe? Nope. All right. Let's talk about LiveView. LiveView is a library, again, which gets a lot of tractions recently, and I love it because it makes Elixir and Phoenix ecosystem more and more recognizable, and it's always a good thing for your technology of choice to grow big. You gain the community, you gain the funds from many different companies, because well, open source is open source, but it's always good when it's funded by great companies. So for example, VS Code, funded by Microsoft recently, it's growing very well while being open source. So it's very good thing that that we have this traction as Elixir community, and people are having very great time with it. LiveView is what really sealed the deal for me as a perfect web development stack. So that's great. And how does it work? Why it came up? The idea is to strip the front-end code to the bare minimum. So developer don't have to write any JavaScript or almost any JavaScript and can do everything on the server. And it does it kind of by, I know it's simplification, but it kind of re-implements React on the server. uh, which is the idea that, you know, it's very, very brave, and I loved that it could be really I really like that it's alive, and you can just, you know, mix, install LiveView and don't bother with JavaScript and have real-time web app. But there are people like me that like JavaScript, and then they don't want to strip JavaScript code to bare minimum, right? Because I think there is stuff that JavaScript does well, and when you keep to this, you'll be having good time developing. So LiveView is Elixir all the way down, almost all the way down actually, because JavaScript is inevitable when you want to have some, you know, animations, interactivity, charts, and so on. You still need to fall back to JavaScript. So you cannot really escape it. I mean, it will be good to escape it someday, but right now you cannot really fully escape it, because it's like the language that is closest to the document object model, which is for now necessary for building web apps. On the other hand, React and Redux is the JavaScript all the way down. So you build all the web app in JavaScript and then try to hook up the server. So maybe I was thinking, let's find some middle ground, and maybe instead of escaping JavaScript at all costs, let's maybe try to embrace the good parts. So I came up with LiveData. So you probably know where is it going. Let's use GenServer to keep the state. So let's use GenServer as a replacement for Redux, and let React do its job and transform the state we send it into UI and handle events that we then push to our GenServer. And that idea came up like a month ago or so, and I was like, well, that's interesting, but I don't know if it will work, how it will work. So I actually managed to build a proof of concept, and it actually worked pretty well. It was a proof of concept that powers our ETL workflow monitor. So it has some usage in production already. It's a production used only by myself, but it was really really pleasant to work with. So I want to show you how it works. Hopefully there will be little syntax errors. So let's write a hello world in LiveData, or rather proof of concept for the LiveData idea. So that will be easy, hopefully, but I have more ambitious task after that. Let's write JS fiddle for HA proxy. So HA proxy is well, a kind of a replacement for Nginx for reverse proxy management and load balancing and so on. And I found on the web that there is no place to go to test some ideas, to test some configuration changes. There is stuff for JavaScript, there are playgrounds for Elixir language, Rust, and so on. There is playground or fiddle for Varnish, but there is no fiddle for HA proxy, so let's just write one. Okay, so I will try to transition to my live coding environment, and I guess it went pretty smoothly. Okay. Hopefully the sound is okay. There are some opinions that it's not, but I don't know what can I do. So I prepared a quick playground. So what I did, I just started a new Phoenix app, just plain Phoenix new, and I made some changes that hopefully can one day be made by a code generator. There is nothing really special here. I'll walk you through what happened. So I bootstrap without Ecto, but I need to generate some UIDs, so I brought it back. I added the LiveData, which is held locally, and I added a very special library, which is called EXXX, which is kind of replacement to Elixir ports, but working much more reliably, and it's way easier to use. I'll show you later how will we use it here. So I also added TypeScript because I want to show you another thing that I figured out lately. And I added the presets for React, nothing special. Some dependencies on the JSON, package JSON. So here's the hint how this proof of concept of LiveData work. It uses JSON patch format, which is, there's RFC for that. There are a few implementations in JavaScript. Fortunately, there is one in Elixir, and that's what I used. UUID generation, React, nothing really special here. TypeScript config for Webpack, importing the application itself, which is just rendering input and hello world, nothing here going. This is like another proof of concept, very proof of concept hook for the LiveData to use it in React. Maybe we'll have some time later to go through it because it's rather simple. This is a Docker module which we'll use later to implement the HA proxy, so no spoilers, sorry guys. Okay, so this is like the Elixir part of the implementation of the LiveData. So first of all, we need to attach the socket in the endpoint under hard-coded path and the module that we created. So here it's just a socket. It's just a Phoenix socket. And I just replaced all of the layout content with just root element that will be used to render React. Okay, so what are we going to do with this hello world? Let's maybe commit that. I really hope that the keyboard is not too loud. It's okay in my headphones, but who knows? So this is the component that we'll try to hook into our LiveData server. So in the proof of concept, it works like drop-in replacement for Gen server. It has exactly the same API. Okay, so let's go to the socket. Let's uncomment the channel that we want to use. Save, and then let's write this hello world channel. Copy paste. Okay. So in order to use LiveData, we need to use LiveData. And there is one single dependency that it's like required for now, at least. You need to specify the endpoint of your application, because that's why we make sure that we send the data to the channels that are interested in our data. So let's hook up this endpoint. and let's write init function. So this is like plain old gen server. In the end, if I replace the use LiveData with use gen server, it would just work, but you wouldn't be able to access it from JavaScript, from like Phoenix channel or WebSocket or whatever, because one thing to keep in mind, it's absolutely not tied to React. It's absolutely not tied to JavaScript at all. It's only like a concept of using WebSocket as a transport for gen server state and the actions that or messages we want to send back, and that's it. So in the end, you could use it, I don't know, you write a Rust UI, start the WebSocket channel and have gen server state synchronized there, no problem. So we all know how to write Elixir. So what do we want to achieve? Let's just make a simple change that this input will actually do something. So let's keep who we want to greet in the state. And then have some, initial state for that. There is one requirement for now, is that the state needs to be a map, but I don't see why it would have to stay that way. It's just simpler to handle only one case, of course. Okay, so we have init, which makes sure that we have the data initialized. There is one part of API that it's still required, but again, doesn't have to be. There is a serialize function, so every time we send the data to the front end, to JavaScript, we can pick the fields that we want to send, or we can transform it, or we can do whatever we want. We can do a database call here, whatever. It's all the matter of how do you want to structure your state and your application. So it's again only a library. It's up to you how you use it, but well, it's at least Elixir library, so that's that's good. So let's make state just return itself. Whatever comes in, the same stuff goes out. So that's it for this module, which will handle our LiveData socket or channel. If we have time after that, I will show you the code of this proof of concept, but in the nutshell, it just uses some macros that overrides the functions that we define, like the callbacks, whatever gen server API is, so handle, info, call, cast, init, and terminate probably. And it just makes sure that after we call those functions, the updated state is sent to server as a JSON patch, and that's it. So when we init, it also sends the stuff that we have. It also generates a channel. So if you were paying attention, here we have the channel on the hello world module while it's not defined. So this is the LiveData that generates it in macros. So let's try to hook it up. But before that, there is a part which is like another thing that I wanted to show you, which is not really tied to the LiveData concept, but I figured out that, well, it may be a good idea to transform the spec for like dialyzer to TypeScript and use those types as a generated ones instead of writing our own. And in this case, it works. Like, it's still a proof of concept, of course, but it's one way to generate your API types to be used in front end when you are using TypeScript, which I love. So not everything works, but well, something works, so we can see how it be doing. So let's write a spec for serialize, make it accept the state, which is just who string and return the same stuff. So when I save and when I make sure that the type is, sorry, I copy pasted that, but it's like not bulletproof. Okay, so once we compile our application, so probably either right now, oh yeah, okay, it's generated because my VS Code runs the compilation. So at the compile time, it generates those types, which are not really nice and not formatted, but we can actually use it. So let's do just that. Let's initialize the socket. So this socket will be coming from our very nice LiveData module, and we'll use LiveData here too. So let's make sure, no, not here. So use LiveData accept some not really interesting arguments like socket or component, which those two probably can be somehow generated. But it also accepts the ID, which is a string, which in most cases will be UUID or something, but it's probably up to you. You can have an input like a select with options of, I don't know, user sessions you can connect to, or you can actually handle user authorization if you want, and then make sure that no third party gets the access to the state. It's a proof of concept, so it's not like something that I spend a lot of time on, especially that I don't needed it. So we can use whatever here for now. We'll make better use of it later when we do AJ proxy. So default state is null. We can leave it out because it's the default. So there is one quirk with that, is that initially the state is null, which we need to handle somehow gracefully, and that what I like to do is to just return early when it's null. So that I'm pretty sure that after that, if everything works fine. So to FatBoss, I'm using Arch Linux and i3VM. Oh yeah, Mieszko knows the stuff. So let's make sure, because this state is unknown, action, nope, unknown, but we can know the types because we just generated it, or just LiveData generated it for us. So we can actually import state action from hello world. Okay, and then boom, state is either state, which is who. That's exactly what we typed in TypeSpec, and action, which there are no actions right now, so nothing we can really do right now. But we can at least display our who, and watch out, it auto-completes. So whatever I type in Elixir, it gets auto-completed in TypeScript. That's pretty awesome. So let's boot up the server and cross fingers that everything will just work. Okay, let's try to refresh that guy, and we'll see nothing, which means it doesn't really work because I don't yet know. Probably I messed it up somehow. Yeah. Okay. The ID comes after the default right now. I mess with the API a lot because it's like on the testing stage. So that's why it happens. But well, it kind of, I think it works because we just define that word in the initial state and it gets pumped into front end, so that's good. So let's make just one more change before we go to the real building of applications. Let's handle the input. So pretty standard stuff. We can call our action here, which there is none yet. So let's start to with implementation of the action so that we get the types. So let's handle call. For now, all the actions from React are calls. Well, it doesn't do anything with the response, so it may make no sense, but that's how it works for now. And they are promises, so you can await the result. But since the state is always synchronized to the front end, I had no case of having to do that. So let's hello someone. So this is like just plain old handler for Gen server, and we plain old reply with OK, and we set the new state here as a third argument of this tuple. It's the new state that we want to return. So since there's only one field in the state, which is who, we can just return it as is. So let's do just that, and let's type it because we can. So let's handle call with hello who, and who is string, and from is PID, which is not really something we need. But as a state, we keep this same map here, and as a return, we do reply, OK, and the state. So it's a bit of a boilerplate, but that's how type specs work. And of course you can extract the types here, but my proof of concept doesn't handle it, so we have to do this boilerplate. State is not used. Okay, thank you, Elixir. Okay, so hopefully it got generated. Let's see. Okay, yeah, we have action. So we have action hello, which accepts the string. Awesome. So let's try to handle it. So we can, yeah, TypeScript, thank you for reminding me the name, and the params. Okay, I made it wrong. So there's another one, requirement that actions also accept maps, which is nothing that cannot change in the future. But for now, it's just easier to treat everything as maps and have maps everywhere. So let's make this tweak. Now it's not a string, but who. Okay, another application, UP. Okay, but now we can see that, okay, who is a string. And if I type a number, nope, sorry, you don't, you cannot send a number here. So let's use the current target, which is our input value. And refresh in the hope it will work again. Okay, boom, try it. Yay, hello Elixir world, hello surfer, awesome. So that's it for the hello world, and I'm glad I made it this far without any problems, because when I tried this presentation before, nothing really worked. So let's see what we can do next. I hope you have a lot of time, and if you can't make it till the end, it will be all recorded, so no worries. So let's continue. Let's continue with our live coding experiment. Let's write real stuff. HA proxy fiddle. So I'm going to discard all this bullshit because we don't necessarily need it. Okay, this is also not needed. let's use this awesome VS Code UI for that. Oh, okay. Okay, it's all good. So I prepared a branch like with a skeleton because I don't want to bore you with React coding. This is not why you are here. So let's see what's there real quick and then try to implement it. So let's boot the server, of course, it's going to be needed. Okay, there you go. So this is a skeleton that I prepared, and it has quite some features. So what we are trying to achieve. So HA proxy, as I said, is a reverse proxy which handles load balancing and has tricky config. It's an unusual stuff for folks like us that do backend development. So let's try to write a tool that will help us to figure out what's going on without having to set up all the environment every time. Ideally, you just go to, I don't know, hjproxyfiddle.com and then you have this whole environment set up. So there are a few parts here. The text area with hjproxy, which this is nothing, it's not hooked up, so these are buttons that we are going to use later. So you can type the hjproxy config here, but actually it will be initialized with default one. Below, oh, this is React. You can just import React split pane and get this, and it's awesome. That's why I like React, and that's what I like in React. You can do all this stuff in no time, actually. It took me 5 minutes to code this prototype, and it's pretty powerful. So proxy logs will go below the config, and then we can bootstrap a server, because proxy can use various backends and can route your traffic basing on, I don't know, query params or round robin load balancing and so on. So we can define all the servers. You need to test your config and then see if your config works, if the traffic is routed properly to the server you specified, or there is syntax error and so on. So okay, so let's try to make it happen, make it work. Of course, this is a huge task, and I don't want to spend 2 weeks on coding that, or maybe not 2 weeks, but a few hours at least. So I prepared a module which is probably something that you see in day-to-day work with Elixir a lot, with very familiar API. So let's see this. Let's see how it works. So there is a Docker module which does this environment setup for us. So if you call Docker init, and you see very simple structure. I love UIDs because you can just generate one and don't care about conflicts. You don't need to keep any state. It's awesome. So it's just a plain structure with 2 strings, which is also duplicated. So probably this would be enough, but it doesn't matter. So what can you do with that? You can start server, you can start proxy, you can make a request to your either proxy or server, and you can reload proxy config. So it boots up with some default proxy config, which I don't want to go into details on how proxy works, that's not the point, but in a nutshell, you need to specify frontend, so the place that requests come into, and it handles like the default config handles just one backend. That means that every request sent to the frontend will go to the backend that we defined, which is just one server, and it's like very basic proxy. And there is Docker Compose. For anyone interested, I will probably definitely share this stuff. Don't know yet how, but we'll see. I may have the repository already set up. So let's try to use it from like no LiveData yet, just Elixir, plain old Elixir, plain old message passing, like whatever you do in day-to-day work, you probably use APIs like that. You can see this exexec that I promised to talk about a bit here. It's a very good library for calling external Unix processes. It handles a lot of stuff, and it does it by, it has some compiled code in it, which is kind of a layer on top of the processes that we call, making sure that they're compatible with like message passing interface of Elixir and Erlang. It's originally Erlang library, which is ERL exec, of course, very cool name. And there is exexec, another cool name for Elixir wrapper on top of that. And we can use it to do anything, and in this case I just used it to call Docker Compose functions. So let's start the server. Docker start server Docker. That means that we will link this Docker process to our current process, which is IEX, but that's okay for now. I need to pass the name. I don't know, server 1 probably. Okay, so it started. I don't need the PID right now, so that's fine that I didn't pattern match it. So let's see flash. Let's see what messages came. No messages. Okay, that's fine. Let's actually boot another window here so we can explore Docker while we are doing that. So up 19 seconds, it seems that it's our guy. So it just started some wild HTTPS echo Docker image, which I don't care how it works under the hood, but it does the job of just echoing whatever we send them. So let's after we have this server running, we can start HAProxy and make sure that it started. Whoop, yeah, this is this guy. It runs, and then if we flash, okay, here are our logs. So it seems there's some bullshit about Docker swarm mode, whatever. Don't need to bother about that. But this is the log from the Docker Compose, which we can safely ignore. This is the interesting one, which is directly from HAProxy. It says that the frontend started, the backend started, and everything is all right. So besides, we can reload config and make a request, but that's let's do it from LiveData right now. So as I said, very standard API. Run some functions, flash some messages, and you are all set. So let's try to implement. Let's start with server maybe this time, or maybe I don't know. Okay, let's start with HAProxy. I have some outline, and it tells me to start HAProxy, so better to follow that. Okay, so we are back to the state 0, so let's HAProxy. Let's create a quick gen server that will use this API I created to spawn those servers. But okay, I know I cannot start with HAProxy because we need to call this Docker init. I mean, I could, but let's start with the application state. So there are a few ways to structure your state, and in React, in Redux, in whatever, in the LiveData. You can use a very granular state, and you can spawn a gen server or create a LiveData channel for each part of your state, and then synchronize like using message passing that we have in Elixir when we need to tell one server that something happened. Or we can have one global state that will hold everything, and then we don't need any message passing because we have all in place, but it can grow big. So I don't have any clue what's the best here, because that's a proof of concept and I never used it for any real stuff. So let's just use the way of having a separate gen server for AJ proxy and separate servers for every server, and the app that will coordinate all of the stuff. Okay, no, this is okay, application. Let's save. We can fill it in with the ones that we'll need later. So we will need server, and we'll need AJ proxy. Okay, so application is going to start rather simple and not channel. Okay. We can copy paste this guy, and I don't care about types right now, so whatever. So to init application, we will need, well, let's mirror this. Let's just Docker init that. Oh, why copy. Let's just Docker init, and that will make sure that the Docker compose have its own context, its own folder, and it's like separated. So every time we start the application, like we go to the URL, this whole gen server application will start unless we provide the same ID. But this time we'll use a random ID for every session, so that we can open up 10 browser windows, and it will be all new first state. Okay, so this is Docker, and what we are going to need in our application, well, Docker, of course, because we'll need to use later. And let's start a server here. So until now, our servers were started via just hooking up the component. So whenever React mounted a component, the new server started, and that works for some stuff. But here we want to orchestrate a bit so that everything is started when we want it, and not when like React decides to mount this and that component. So let's start with starting the server, because oh, actually we don't have to do that. We can start with AJ proxy. So I extracted very simple API for starting the server from, not from the JavaScript, but from the Elixir, and it's all proof of concept, of course, so it may change in the future. So it's just start, and it accepts the name, which we define like the AJ proxy colon ID. So let's do just that. Let's generate the ID. So this is actually probably, hopefully, okay, PID, if I'm not mistaken. Let's generate the ID. And use it here. So this is our first param, and we will need to send just one thing, which is Docker, so it knows where to hook up. That's it. We can keep it in the state if we want, because it may come handy. We need serialize, and here it will do something actually, because we don't need either Docker or AJ proxy, sorry, in our frontend. So let's drop those keys. like that. Okay, we need ID. So this is something that will go to the front end, because then when we render the component of AJ proxy, we need to pass the ID, so it connects to exactly the server that we defined here. It's undefined because, well, it's not there. So let's define it. AJ proxy. Okay, so for init, it will have Docker, and instead of Docker init, it will spawn the HA proxy server with the same API that we used here. So as you can see, it returns a tuple of 3 items, and we only care about the middle one. So let's just use it. We don't need that. I don't know if we need Docker. Let's keep it here. PID. Okay, so it means nothing if we don't hold any state, because right now there is nothing useful here. So let's have something useful. Let's have some logs, and I'm using lists for logs because it's way easier to diff them and send only the new logs, or it's append only, but it doesn't care, because when you append something to the log, it will JSON patch magic and then send only the stuff that changed to the front end. So if we keep it as a list, we are sure that the updates are optimal. Otherwise, if it was a string, it would be updated, like sent to the server, sent to the front end again as a whole. So that's not what we need. Okay, so when we start HA proxy here, in the context of this gen server, which is LiveData, but it's really a gen server and you can treat it like it. That means that every message that we flashed in our IEX, it will come as handle info callback here. So let's try to use it, and let's do std out, and we don't care about, because this is PID of the Unix process, which we don't care about, because we just hook one thing here and it will be always the one that we are interested in. And there is a message here, and it accepts the state, of course, and returns no reply and the state. So we can use our beloved map put to make sure that our logs, so new lines, our message string split. Okay, so that means that every line in the message will be as entry in the list. So if we want to append those to our state, we just do state logs ++ new lines, and that will immediately make sure that we have a new list, which we then put onto the state. And that's probably what should do for our HA proxy, at least for now, because we are not doing yet. We are not doing the reloading yet. Let's also handle error to have more logs. We love logs. All the logs are good. So that will just come. So we just see when it starts. Okay. So this is our HA proxy. Rather simple, I would say, for what it does. And this is our application, which starts this HA proxy with this ID and makes sure that front end can handle this ID to mount the proper component. So let's probably move to the front end part. So here is our application and the stuff that I showed you here. Let's zoom in if it's not readable. Okay. So we want to hook this HA proxy, which I already set up, but this HA proxy fiddle component is the central state that we want to hook the app state into. So let's do just that. Like this, and we need socket. And we need to pass the socket here. Okay, I no longer use TypeScript because I don't want to clutter the output. I hope that I make no errors. So I know there's a, let's import it. Well, TypeScript, even if it's not in TypeScript context, it can tell you some stuff. So use LiveData, use socket from use LiveData. Okay, so here it is, LiveData component, which is our application default state, which is null, and the ID that we want to generate once per session. So when you open the URL, refresh the browser, you get a new one. Let's call it client ID. Let's use this awesome JavaScript library for generating UIDs. Okay, so here we are. Having the state null is not really useful. We could show the loader, we could do whatever, I don't care. It will flash for just a quick moment because we are all on the local machine. So let's log the state to see what's going on, because I wrote some code and I'm not sure if it's fine. Okay, so probably refreshing. I love those errors. There is one problem. This is the biggest problem with this proof of concept of mine that uses macros a lot, that errors are sometimes not really useful. But right now we are probably dealing with this HA proxy start call, which is not somehow broken. Let's figure it out. Okay, so it's definitely line number 9. I will just comment it for now and then see. Oh, okay, it's okay. Yep, it's undefined because I did not alias it. So that should help. I'm not sure. Let's see. So okay, when you refresh in the web browser, Phoenix have the socket to make sure that server is reloaded too. So that's enough to make it work. So we have exactly the same state that we defined in the serialize. So basically where I am. Okay, so we drove the Docker and HA proxy PID, and that means this is only one left, and this is exactly what's there. So let's use that. I'm going to use it to I'm going to pass it to HA proxy state. No autocompletion now because no TypeScript. And let's pass the socket too, because I don't want to create all of the sockets. You can use React context for that. Proof of concept, you know. Okay, so HA proxy is the stuff that accepts ID and socket now. Oh. So that means that we can again use LiveData, but this time instead of passing the client ID, we'll pass it the ID that was initialized. So here we were passing the ID that we generated on the front end, but the application holds the state and it holds the HA proxy ID. So let's use it and make sure that we connect to the right server that we just initialized in the application, and make sure that we use right server. And this story happens again. I'm not proud of it. Probably there's a better way to handle that, but that will do. Let's log the state again and see what we have. Use LiveData not defined. Okay, boom, boom, boom. And refresh, and what happens? Let's see, loading. So no loading for us because JSON encoder. Okay, so in HA proxy we have serialize, and we mistype the PID, and it means that it won't get dropped, and JSON does not know how to encode the PID. So let's make sure we drop the right key and refresh, hopefully having some logs on the front, and that's so awesome. I love it. So these are exactly the same logs that that we expect. There are no logs from HAProxy yet because it tries to resolve the domain name, which is not there yet, so it takes some time, but after a few seconds, oh, okay. So here we go. Okay, so HAProxy told that parsing failed, blah, blah, blah. Let's display them and then see it in the nice UI instead of just browser console, which makes no sense. So state is logged now, and we know that it has the logs key, which is just the array, and I prepared the logs component, which is nothing really interesting. It just maps all the logs and displays them in code format. So let's replace this hard-coded stuff with actual state logs. Okay, so that's already somehow useful. We know that our default HAProxy config is not working without the server respond. So let's okay, it's 7:11. Oh, 7:11 right now. I will just continue, and if you are just bored, just drop off and come back later. It will be all recorded. I have a flow, so let's finish it. I promise it won't take that long. Okay, so let's actually display the config now. So in HAProxy module, we start HAProxy, and we have a very handy method of reading the config. So if we scroll here in the Docker module, we actually have the read config, which is it does some tricky stuff because it needs to keep the IDs to make sure the Docker does not conflict, but it's not essential, so let's not get into that. But what we can get into is actually displaying this config. So as I said, we have two ways right now to do that. We can just serialize, so whenever anything changes, we hope that just reading the config here is enough, but that assumes that there is no place for this config to change other than some of the handlers, which is not always the case. Probably right now, I think it's better to keep everything in the state. It's a trade-off, because if we want to keep everything in the state, it means it's in the memory. So if we are memory constrained or there are lots of data to keep, then we can just keep some IDs in the state and make sure they are replaced with real values in serialize, for example, pulling them out from Postgres, but it's an optimization that's not necessary. So for now, so let's read config here and make sure it gets passed to our HAProxy component. So we drop this stuff instead of picking, so it's blacklist, so it should be there. Okay, docker read config, it's okay, one argument, that should do. So we'll come to a tricky place right now with React, but let's have it accept the value of state config so we can at least read it. Okay, so it got read, but as you can see, I'm typing right now, believe me or not, and it does not work because the way how React works, it makes sure that whatever you have in the state, it gets displayed in the UI, and no less, no more. So when you say that the text area has the value of state config, it's just this. If you want to edit it, well, you need to be explicit and handle it yourself, which we are of course going to do right now. So let's introduce state of value, which is going to use React state, and initialize it with nothing, and use value instead of our config there, and make sure that on change we replace it with the new value. So right now we can edit it, but that's probably not what we wanted, because we still want to grab it from the config. So that's why React introduced the concept of effects. So whenever something changes in your dependencies, so state or props, you can trigger some other events. So we can tell React that whenever state.config changes, okay, the state can be null here. This is tricky, and I don't like React for that. I like it for other stuff, but let's embrace it. Okay, let's embrace it. So if state is null, it's not null. We know it's initialized, so we know the config is there. So let's set value to state config, and that will work. But to be completely React compatible, we need to provide all of the dependencies. So set value should not change, but we never know, it's React. So let's do what they have, what they say that we have to do. So let's make sure that every dependency is set up here. So right now, whenever we receive the not null state from the server, we make sure to update our value, and from now on we can update it freely on our own. So like I said, we have the config which we can edit now, which is great. Okay, so once we edit the config, we want to reload it. So let's use this button for this. And whenever we click it, we want to trigger some action in our Gen server, which will be reload config, and we'll pass new config. Okay, something like this. Don't bother with the naming. So when we go back to our AJ proxy, we can of course handle call reload. Yep, I like writing codes from state. So this is standard, and then we want to update this config, but it's not enough, because actually we want to handle some side effects here, which we can do because we are not Redux, we are Elixir, which is awesome, and we're Gen servers, which are awesome. Safe to handle side effects here. Let's do that. So our side effect is Docker module, which has reload config, which actually does some side effects. So it calls IO, so it writes the file and then makes sure that AJ proxy is reloaded via this very cryptic command. So let's do just that. Docker reload config. This is a synchronous call. So if you want to tell user that it can take some time, like a few seconds. So if you want to tell user that okay, wait, we are on it. So we can introduce that concept to our state. So there is a way to handle it on React side, but I want to use Elixir as much as I can. So let's introduce a new variable in the state, which tells us if we are reloading config. So this is awesome because I can just task async this call and make sure that it does reply the front end immediately, but instead of updating config right now, we just say that config reloading is true. Okay, so we handle that asynchronously. That means that we need to somehow know whether it got completed. So let's figure out what our server PID is, because in the context of task it will change. And after we successfully reload config, passing the Docker here and the new config, we can tell ourselves that the config is reloaded with the new config that we can make sure to update in the state later. But actually we don't have to do that because frontend now holds the state. So let's keep it simple. In the config cannot change in the meantime in the process of reloading, so there is no sense to send it back to the server. We could do that, of course, we don't have to. Okay, so we are reloading the config and sending the message, so we need to handle it. So we handle that config is reloaded and make sure that we no longer keep user waiting. So no reply. And state config reloading is false. Okay, so this is very asynchronous workflow and you can do that, of course it works. Okay, sorry Elixir, I put my handle info close to the other handle infos. Okay, let's test it because we have the action called here without config with new config value and see what happens. Boom. So let's say we want to add another server, which is also server 1, and hit reload config. Okay, so we don't handle the loader, and there is some very cryptic Docker error, which is probably the problem in my Docker layer. Okay, maybe refresh will do. Okay, so no, nothing is called because there is an exception, which comes from, I hate those errors. Well, it's not really good. I don't know. It just went too good. I will try to remove all those networks from Docker, which tend to be some solution. Okay, no errors, no errors. Okay, so let's get this action back here. Let's refresh to be honest, to be safe. Okay, this is the error in somewhere in here. Somewhere in here. So let's introduce some logging, because our exceptions are telling us nothing. So it went just too good. Let's start with just doing nothing on. Maybe I made a mistake here. Oh no. Yes, this is it. There's still this. I have never seen it. Maybe because I mess up with these weird networks in Docker. Okay, so this is right. Let's move back and let's just return anything here, and let's put some logging. It's somewhere else. I just introduced this function. Okay, no error right now. And error. Okay, so we see that we see that there is an action coming in. Okay, so it logged. So let's uncomment one by one. Let's just say we only put the config reloading back. Okay, it passed. So let's make sure we actually handle that. So whenever state config reloading is true, then we say loading instead of reload config, and that should say okay. So it seems the callback is working fine. Let's go back and try to make it work. PID and the task. Okay, so let's leave it out and see what's going on now. I can just recompile instead of refreshing. Oh, we have to refresh because I don't handle the. Okay. Boop. Okay, so it's this docker reload con. I have the docker here. Let's log whatever we send there. It's not even logged. This is okay. Because when I restart the server, our frontend is still using the ID that it's not initialized with, so that's why we see those errors after resetting the server. Okay, so we passed the tier ID and the config, so all good. No way to be not working. Yeah, right now it worked fine. Okay, very cryptic. I assume that it is because my proof of concept Docker module is not really good. So let's see if it's fine now. let's wait to, okay, it's initialized. Okay, it worked. Awesome. So as we saw, when I hit reload config, it waits a little bit, and then it moves back to the old state. Okay, we don't have AJ proxy working, so that's probably the last thing I will do. Make sure that we can spawn the server. It should go just fine, hopefully, unless Docker will play tricks on me. Because actually AJ proxy cannot start without any server. That's why it takes a long until it starts. So I will give myself 10 minutes and then I will show you the end effect I have somewhere prepared if I cannot make it. So here we accept the server, and then okay, so get back on track. Server is already defined, so once we start the application, we want to start with one already generated server, so let's do that. So it's very similar to what we do with AJ proxy, but it's a server PID, it's a server now that we start, and server that we alias. A lot of servers. Okay, so it accepts the Docker, but it needs a name. So as a name, because in the default AJ proxy config we have server_1 as a name, so let's use it here so it knows what to call and it does not return this error that it cannot resolve the address of the server. Okay, so when we started, there's one thing that I forgot to do. Maybe that's why we have seen those errors, because probably the way it works, the LiveData as it is right now, once you connect to the channel, it makes sure, like, it connects you to the channel and then spawns a gen server, but only if it's not there yet. If it's there, it just returns the PID of it. So you can have many channels with the same ID connected to this single server, which is useful sometimes, but that means that we need to keep track of who is connected, because after every parent is dropped or terminated, so probably user disconnects every channel that uses this server, we need to terminate the server itself. So I forgot to attach this PID to our application server. That means that when we refreshed, all of the Docker machines stayed up until we resetted the server. So let's make sure that we do right now, that we do attach it, and then we'll hold the servers as a list, which has only one right now. Okay, server ID, server what? Okay, cool. So let's keep track of it for just in case. Okay, someone's coming. All right, so sorry about that. So we have started the server, we attached it, it's saying that it's not available, so let's save it. Okay, so the server will, instead of starting AJ proxy, it will start server, and it will accept the name. Okay, let's pass it here. So we just started the server the same way as we started AJ proxy. We no longer need to read any config because there is no config. So let's drop it. We keep the logs. Logs are good. we don't need to do this. We drop Docker and PID, we keep only the logs. So right now we attached, like we started the server in the context of this this module, this LiveData module. Okay, so it means that we should see some logs. This is not needed. Okay, I hope this will work right now. I hope. That's only thing I have left. So our HA proxy should start way quicker right now. Let's restart the server just in case. There's still this cryptic error from Docker, which I have never came across, but it seems it started because it's no longer telling us the DNS error is there. So probably it should say, okay, yeah, that's it. So now when I hit the reload config, it returns some logs that makes sure, like it's reflected in the logs, right? So when I reload the config, it's in the logs. I don't know. I probably have a subtle bug with either my React code or the Elixir, because it eats my config for some reason. This is called React frustration that I was talking about, and maybe my hypothesis makes no sense, that if you use it only for the stuff it's good at, then it will be just no frustration. Probably not. It's still frustrating, because right now I'm not really sure. I have this code working, and it wasn't really so hard to get to it, but maybe it was too ambitious to do live coded. So, you know, guys, I will just show you how it works, like the end effect. I think we achieved pretty substantial stuff here, and maybe 15 or half an hour more, and it will be a working tool for debugging. So yeah, I will try to just open my original app. So I will show you how it's supposed to work. Okay, refresh. No. So this means that there is very weird thing going on. Maybe I messed with it, because right before the presentation it was all working. Okay, let's wait. Let's make it settle. Okay, we have some bullshit here, because in this original application I coded, it was all attaching properly, and it was killing the servers, the Docker containers that it didn't need. So okay, so this is actual working thing that's that does the stuff we want to do. So we can make a request using HTTP syntax, which is just using a Docker image. So if we make a request to HA proxy here, and it should come back as a log in a moment, because Docker is mysterious. Timeout. Okay. You know, guys, I have no clue why it stopped working. My idea is that the Docker got messed up. So let's keep it like it's not. Oh, okay. It works now. It's my Docker layer that's broken and probably made those problems before. Let's keep it that way. So when we call HA proxy right now, we should see the logs. Yep. So this is our playground. So I can add the server, and if I make sure that it's called cold. So here's the backend for HA proxy. If you have two servers, it means that we'll round robin the traffic between those. If I now reload config, I will see the logs, and if I send those requests, it will go one to the server 1 and another to server 2. Yeah, so that's what we wanted to achieve, and I didn't make it in time, sorry. But I will definitely finish it using this skeleton I prepared because it's much nicer. And that's not very optimistic accent to end with, but it happens, it's live coding. So I'm waiting just a few moments for questions. If you're not too I'm not sure how big is the lag. It's probably about 1 minute, so let's just wait. Okay, I don't have any slide that tells that's it. I can fiddle with open broadcast studio. Can I text? Yeah. Okay. Text. That's all, folks. That's my end slide, which, okay, that's all, folks. Thank you very much. I hoped you liked it. And despite those problems, I hope that you think a bit about if it makes sense or not. Because I think it's very promising, especially that it's not like I made it up and then nothing happened. I actually coded some applications with it, and it's really promising. It's just very early days, so please excuse those problems, and hope you liked it. Okay, that's it. Any questions? Okay, let's have my emails. My email was So if any questions, this is my email. Very professional. And see you next time. Bye.